and I'm very happy to be here with Balenda Ganem.
Thank
And she is David Thibodeau's mother. And when everything happened at Mount Carmel in 1993, she immediately went to Waco to see what she could do to help. So thank you, Belinda, for being here with me. And I know a lot of people have seen you in the most recent documentary on Netflix, and we all appreciate you very much, especially the mothers and our mothers of everybody who was there, actually. And so can you start off by telling us a little something about your background? Um,
Oh my gosh, my background. It's it's my background is as wild as crazy as I've been. My parents were in the military, my father in the Air Force, my mother in civil service. I was born in the Azores. My mother was attached to government military offices as a secretary in Tresera, which is the third island of the Azores, which was a military supply depot for World War II and for Korean War as well. So my father was in military supply. So I was born there. We were with the military for some time. I was raised in rural Louisiana. So when I speak about the South, I speak about it from experience.
mhm.
And then when my parents' marriage ended, we came up to Maine. My mom was from Maine. So we came up here and my mother started a new life and went through Bangor schools, graduated high school, got married and had David early, and went on to college. And I was I'm very, I think I need to say this right out for people who wonder what my spirituality, what my politics are. I am very diehard progressive Democrat, and my spirituality is fluid. I'm a member of the
Mhm.
Unitarian Universalist community of Bangor, Maine. I was raised Catholic, made a decision at some point in my life to walk away from that because I did not feel that Catholicism was terribly kind to women. I wanted
Mhm.
to be in a spiritual dimension in which women were given all the room to grow that they needed to and all the power to speak that was necessary. So, I've traveled, I've lived in Europe, I've traveled through Europe and North Africa. Um, I've always been politically active in organizations like Peace in Central America and Let Cuba Live. I demonstrated against the Vietnam War. I demonstrated for gay rights. I've demonstrated for women's rights. I'm just, that's just a liberal progressive woman from New England. And
Mhm.
I'd like to think to some extent that I'm kind of what that's all about.
Great, wonderful. Thanks.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, so in let's see, what year did David or do you call him David or Dave?
I call him
Uh
Dave. Well, depends on what mood I'm in. I call him David. I
okay.
call him David and Dave, but usually now that he's an adult, I call him David more often. He's earned it.
Okay.
He had a plethora of little nicknames when he was growing up. But if I told you those, he would never speak to me again. So he has graduated to David as
Okay.
of late. Yeah.
All right, great. And so when you heard that that he had met this guy called David Koresh and that he had gone from Hollywood to Mount Carmel, what were your thoughts about that?
Oh my, that's a web to begin with. David lived in Los Angeles and I was living in Greece. And I would come home in the winter and stay with my mother to help my mother through the winters because my mother's life was slowing down. But every winter I went out to California for a few weeks. I had David in Los Angeles and a dear friend in San Francisco that I would go up and visit as well. David had met David Koresh, Steve Snyder, and Mike Schroeder at the the guitar center where he used to work in Los Angeles. And when I came out one winter to visit, he started to talk to me a little bit about them. He liked them. They had a band. They told him point blank, we're a religious community. We're looking for a drummer, but we want you to know. They were honest with him right from the very beginning. we are a religious group, and if you wanted to join our band, you'd have to come and listen to our message and, you know, make your own decisions. So it started out where you had an awful lot of autonomy. And he started talking to me about it, and I was disturbed. As I said, my spirituality is fluid. I was raised Catholic. David was raised Catholic. I always encouraged him to find his own way spiritually. He could choose to stay in the Catholic Church. We were always interested in Buddhism, and I studied it for some time. I really suggested that he do some studies in Buddhism because I think it's a greatly balanced spirituality, especially in America, Western Buddhism. But, you know, I always wanted David to find his own path, but I was really concerned about the Bible path, Catherine, to be honest with you. And I don't mean ever to be disrespectful, but for me, the Bible is a book written by men, for men, and about men. And for me, the role of women in the Bible is to sacrifice, and I don't find that balanced. So I always put the Bible aside and in a line with other spiritual books. I believe that they all have a message for all of us, and I think that our big mistake is that we separate them all out. So I was worried. He was going into a Bible group, and most Bible religious groups that people go into are very Old Testament with a veil of New Testament, which can be very convoluted because Jesus's words get very misconstrued, and I find that they get abused. And then, of course, the Bible of the Old Testament is a time in which people had very little learning and lots of superstition. So I was concerned right off the bat. The next time I came out, the next year, he took me to the Pomona House, where I met some of the people from the Pomona House and found them all very lovely. I liked them very much. But there was something hidden. There was a stack of papers. It was like a manifesto of some sort, or a greatly, elaborated essay written by David Koresh about the religion political thing and what was going to happen. And I started to look through it, and David didn't want me to read it. He said I wouldn't understand it. So of course I immediately felt very insulted because of course I'd understand it, but this was something that I wasn't to read because it would put up a red flag for me. So I'm concerned. I go home that year. I say to my mother, I don't know about this. David's going into this community and I'm really concerned about it. And my mother was as well. But it's David's path. It's what he has to come to grips with. He has to make the decision if this is the right thing for him, and or if it's not the right thing for him and he walks away. I just wanted to make sure that my voice as a family member and as a mother was going to be front and center there. So over time, as he was in Waco, I'm going back to Greece. I come back to Maine. He is at this point not living at Mount Carmel. He is living in town, taking care of the instruments at this place that they play at. So he's got a room in the back. So he's still in transition. And I still am very, very innocent of what this group is all about. I have no information. I'm gleaning it from him through our telephone conversations. And next thing you know, I'm talking to him on the phone. I'm asking him heavy questions. He's answering them the best he can. If I back David into a corner, David Koresh comes on the phone. So I have a number of conversations with David Koresh, which began very open and I'm thinking this guy might actually be okay. He might have something. He might actually have a community of merit that, but I don't know. I don't know enough about it yet. One time I'm talking to David Koresh on the phone, and let me digress just for a second. If I get off topic, please pull me back in, because I do this all very stream of consciousness when you start going back 30, 35 years.
That's great. Go ahead.
I'm on a conversation with David Koresh, and I said to him, well, why aren't you guys doing ministry out in the world? And he said to me, we did. We did it in Los Angeles. We tried to do ministry down at Skid Row, and I'm thinking that's too much to take on. And it didn't work. And I said, well, what are you doing now? And he said, right now, we're trying to make ourselves better people. Well, those were the buzzwords I needed to hear, because that works for me. You're trying to make yourselves better people. You've gone within and you're working on yourselves and your community. Okay, I can respect that. Next conversation I have with him, a little bit more intense. He wants me to come out. He wants to meet me. He loves David. David's married to Michelle. I don't know that Michelle is his sister-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Michelle has Serenity. I don't know who Serenity's dad is. And I
Yeah.
do not know about the twins. I know nothing about the twins. So you can see that this stuff happens in real long lived gradations in which parents are, get to have more information about what their loved one is learning, doing, and expected to do. So I said to David Koresh is going on to me about how he can interpret the Bible, how he knows the seven seals, how it's been revealed to him. And he goes into kind of a religious diatribe with me. And I say to him, David, are you the Messiah? Are you the second coming? And he says, yes, I am. Well, that's all it took. I said to my mom, this is not good. And I've got to make arrangements to go out to Waco. So I was making arrangements. That was the year of the assault. And lots of people were coming out to Mount Carmel for Passover of that year, if the assault hadn't happened. And that's when I was going to go. I wanted to go when there was a time where there were a lot of people there, not just the full-time community. Because honestly, Catherine, I didn't know if I would be safe. You don't know what you're walking into.
Mm-hmm.
I've had enough reading and understanding of religious group, religious sects and cult groups to know that you've got to be on guard. You've got to get your information. You've got to tread carefully. I mean, I come from the time of the family, Charlie Manson. I come from the time of Guyana with Jim Jones. And I'm in the time of Helen Claire Prophet, Church Universal and Triumphant.
Excuse me, Elizabeth Clare Prophet.
Oh, yes. Elizabeth Clare Prophet, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, she's trying to buy a tank. At this time, she's trying to buy an Abrams tank, and they've got a massive arsenal. So I'm saying to myself, get your
I'll
information.
just add, they were survivalists. So yeah, they were survivalists, and I went inside their the large fallout shelter. Yeah, so they invited some scholars to come out, and
I didn't know that.
It was an amazing fallout shelter. But anyway, I can tell you about that later. But
we'll talk about that later. And I was concerned about that because I knew that they were international, that they had their own university. And I'm thinking, boy, things are, and then Ruby Ridge had just happened. Things are falling into place that say danger, danger for everyone involved. So I said to my mother, I got to go out there. So I'm planning to go out at Passover. And of course, February, the assault happens. Yeah. So I get the news that the assault has happened. I'm thinking, no, that's not David's community, because David's community that's not what they do. I've talked to, enough people. I know that there's enough level-headed thinking there to challenge David Koresh when necessary, and didn't realize how wrong I was. So I said to my mother, I got to go. I'm on the telephone with the FBI, and I'm on the telephone with a cult deprogrammer named Rick Ross, who was saying, come on out here. And the feds are telling me to stay home. We've got it under control. And so I say to the FBI, well, what about families? Oh, why aren't you working with the families? Well, we don't really need to work with families right now. And I said, yes, you do. You've got to work with families because you've got our kids under assault and we're worried and we need to be out there. So they're telling me not to come, which says to me, you go as quickly as you can. And in the next 24 hours, my brother, Bob, who's now deceased, bless him, and myself were on a plane and on our way to Waco. Okay. So I'm already in mother hen mode and in, defense mode. Mm-hmm. So I'm on way out there to take whatever comes my way and learn as much as I can, and hope to be of some sort of use, to be able to put the right elements together, the right words together, and the right moments together to be able to get David and his family out. My friend Julie, I became friends with Julie Martinez.
Oh, yes.
And just loved her, absolutely loved her. I spent some time with her in LA with David when she was looking for her estranged son. One of the father of Julie's eldest son had taken the boy and was in hiding with him. So I spent a fair amount of time with her in Los Angeles because we were on this hunt for her kid. And in hindsight, thank heavens we didn't find him because he lives today. But, you know, I knew then that this was really bad. And this was the federal government, and all of my political awareness and political involvement had told me the federal government will not be maligned. The federal government will not be put upon. The federal government will not be, if you could just get them to yield a little bit, maybe you could get something in there, but they don't yield either. So we went out to Waco, and I was ready to start whatever endeavor was, you know, facing me.
So where did you go to reach out to the FBI? Where did you see them?
We got to Waco. We got into a hotel. I'm talking to the FBI. No. I called the police. I called Sheriff Harwell at the Waco Police Department. And I wanted to get information from him first because he's local, he's on the scene. And thank heavens I did that first, because he gave me information that was countered by the FBI agent who led the press conferences. So
that meant the press conferences. I think that would be Bob Ricks. He was special agent in charge from Oklahoma City.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
So then later on, I would be dealing with Bob Ricks and Jeff Jamar, because Jeff Jamar would be up there as well.
Okay. So so Jeff Jamar was the special agent in charge from San Antonio, and he was the on-site commander. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you met them.
So I'm on the phone with Harwell's office, and I said to him, "What is going on? I'm here. You know, where do I go?" And he told me where the FBI command post was. And I don't remember, Catherine, if it was at Baylor or if it was somewhere at a community center. I can't remember where the initial meeting place was where you signed in as a family member. But I said to him, "What's going on?" The police had, the FBI had said something about, "We don't need families, and aren't families here? Aren't families engaged?" He said to me, "We have had to put in so many phone lines in order to be able to field telephone calls from families all over the world." So I'm saying, okay, good.
Who was it that told you that? This many phone lines?
Harwell, Sheriff Harwell.
Harwell. Okay.
I'm on the phone with Sheriff Harwell because the first thing I ask everywhere I go is, "You take me to your boss. I know that you've got some information. I need to speak to the big guy." So I do that to the best of my abilities as much as I can. So we go to, oh God, that was awful. We go to where we first made our first contact with the FBI, and they were giving the puppies away. I know, it was heartbreaking. I didn't know what had happened to the dogs at that point, but little puppies were being given away. And to this day, I just hate myself for not having taken one, but of course I couldn't do it. So
let's just explain for the viewer of this video the significance of the puppies. So it's my understanding that at the beginning of the ATF attempted dynamic entry, that at some point the dogs in a pen got shot, but there were some puppies too. So those were the puppies that they were giving away. Is that right?
What I had asked David to clarify that, because I use that as a prime example of poor policing. That if dogs are in a pen and if dogs are contained and they are no harm to you, there is no reason to execute animals. And they executed the dogs. Apparently there were 4 Malamute, whatever, mixes. But the mother dog was inside Mount Carmel, and I did not realize that. And the puppies went out with the kids. I think the first group of kids that came out, the puppies went out with them because they were worried about them. I don't know why they didn't send the mother dog out. I wish they had, but I think that they were worried that she would be euthanized.
I see.
So so we go in from there. You know, I'm looking at these puppies and I want one so badly, but I can't. You know, I've got this mission and I live in my mother's house, and half of the year I live abroad. I live in Greece. So we sign in, and it was awful. And the young woman that was signing me in, honestly, Catherine, I just wanted to throttle her. She was so hard and so tough. And I was really getting emotional. She was being mean. And I said, why are you talking to me this way? I am a mother of someone inside Mount Carmel. I am here on my son's behalf and on the behalf of his friends and family. Why are you being so harsh? And my brother, who has military background, bless his heart, pulls me aside and says, let me handle this, Belinda. And thank heavens he did, because I was just getting wound up. But what that said to me was, get yourself together, because this is just the very beginning. And she is just a very minor agent. You are going to be dealing with what is for you, you know, the beast incarnate. And I am really going to have to keep myself together. And I'm going to have to learn how to deal with this military ideology, because I don't have it. So that's where it starts. We sign in, we've already got a motel room, and then we just start getting information. I met Rick Ross right off the bat. He gave me a lot of information. He told me about the Brittany Hotel, and he gave me information about what information he had that he was willing to give up, because he's working with the FBI and the BATF. So he's working with the federal government as their mouth for cult awareness. I am trying to suss him out. He wants me to retain him for David. And I'm thinking,
in other words, he wanted you to pay him. Is that right?
Yeah, right off the bat. If you retain me, and I'm thinking, I don't even know you yet. And I don't know, I got to learn. I mean, I just have got to get this worked out in my head. And in the process of dealing with the FBI, and I'm talking with Rick Ross, and then at one point he says to me, which is contrary to everything I believe spiritually and ethically, he says to me, oh, I hope they get them. I hope they all come out. I hope David Koresh goes to prison, and I hope he gets raped every day for the rest of his life. And I'm just, oh, geez. Oh, my God. I cannot hear this. This is not what I believe. This is not what I think. I don't care how guilty you are. You go to prison. You stay in prison for the length of your crime. You don't get out if your crime is truly heinous. And that's how you learn to live your life for the crime that you've committed. But I do not wish violence on anyone in prison, because if you wish violence on anyone in prison, then you wish it on everyone in prison. And we know that Americans' prisons are populated with people who are not guilty. We don't wish them ill. We wish them survival, you know. So I said, oh God, this is not going to work. I'm not going to work with him anymore. And so at that point I stopped working with him. And I went on to find Steve Hassan, who in the end I did work with. But that comes a little bit later down the line, I think, unless you want to talk about him now.
Yeah, I know. I'm curious how. I'm curious about Steve Hassan. So, but you say there's that's down the line. So we'll remember to come back to Steve Hassan. Okay?
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
He plays a major role in my strength to stay and do what I'm doing. So we're at first steps. The first thing that happens to me is I am approached by a wonderful woman named Katie Boyle, who is the producer of 48 Hours, the Waco story. So she comes to me, she's press, of course, press has already got a wind that I'm there, and they're following us everywhere, and we're doing interviews. I am asking, the press is manipulating me, and I'm trying to manipulate them as well, because I'm trying to get information. They have information I don't have. I already know that. And my mother and I had been kind of schooled by a number of press people by phone before I left Waco, giving me ideas of who to see, what questions to ask, what little signs to look for that might mean manipulation. So I did have a little bit of my own arsenal, and I'm starting to make contact with the press, and they're asking me questions and I'm asking them questions. And so Katie Boyle approaches me and she says, we're with 48 Hours and we're doing a show, and I'd really like to feature you because you're the only parent out there doing what you're doing. Well, I like 48 Hours and I like 60 Minutes, and my mother and I watch all of those shows. We respect them. I'm a frontline, enthusiast, especially because I watch public broadcasting. And we respect them, and we believe that they're looking for the truth, because we like to think we're good Americans, and that's what the media does, is looking for the truth. So I say, sure, yeah, this would be really helpful to me as well. They've got cars, they're going to take me around. They've promised to, I did nothing for money, but I made negotiations for my telephone bills, for meals, and for transportation, because I was out there without money. I wasn't working. I had a hiatus from my winter job because I was going to be in Waco, so I wasn't working. I did not come out to Waco with very much money, and I did not expect my family to bankroll me while I was out there. That wasn't going to happen. So I negotiate for the things that I need to get around Waco and to be able to be there, nourishment, sustenance, transportation. And she says, yeah, sure, we will cover you. We will cover your phone bills. We will cover all of that, all of the implemental things that you need in order to do what you're doing. So we start, I'm working with 48 Hours, and they're taking me around and they're taping and we're interviewing. And then another woman comes and she approaches me, and her name is Catherine Davis. And she's from CBS Morning Live. And she's wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful. And she says, Belinda, if you work with me as well, I'm going to put you on the television 3 times a week, at least. In the morning, you are going to be the point woman, the point family person, and I'm not going to edit you. You're going to be live. Nobody is going to be able to take your words and edit them out or manipulate them. And she says to me, I don't know that 48 Hours will do that or not, but they will be editing heavily for their production. And I'm thinking, oh dear, I didn't even think about that, because I don't have this information yet. So I say, you bet. So with Katie Boyle, I'm working with her, and then I start working with Catherine Davis as well for CBS Morning Live. But Katie Boyle from 48 Hours is the person who brings me into the very first press conference where all of the media are gathered. And Bob Ricks is the spokesperson. And I'm there. They don't know that I'm not press. So we're in the front row. I'm the family person. My brother, who refuses to get involved in anything in front of the camera, goes out back and just stands in the doorway and watches. And the press conference begins, and people start asking questions, and they're asking questions, about, well, what do you think is going to happen? And he's answering, and then somebody says to him, well, what about, are any families out here, and what's going on with families? And Bob Ricks says, oh, families aren't involved in this at all. These families are estranged from these people. They have nothing to do with the people inside Mount Carmel. The people in Mount Carmel have walked away from their families. And I'm really starting to steam. So my hand goes up and he calls on me. And I said, I didn't say that I was a family member because Catherine told me not to. I said, I don't understand what you're saying. I said, from what I understand from Sheriff Harwell.
Harwell. Yes.
I'm my brain is just engaging very quickly. That families are calling from everywhere, that they've had to put in more phone lines. Families are very concerned about their families inside Mount Carmel. And don't you think that having a bridge with the families as well as the FBI negotiators might aid in getting a better result? People are coming out, this is not how a hostage situation generally works. People do not go out in hostage situations. They stay in until everyone's dead or it's negotiated properly. But this isn't a hostage situation. This is something completely different. So families, don't you think families would have a real, you know, a real effect in the outcome of this? And he goes, no. And he just kind of, he brushes me right off. So I'm done. He's not going to call on me again. And then
But
he says to
good for
somebody,
you.
he says to somebody afterwards, who's that? And then they told him who I was. And at that point, of course, I'm banned from all press conferences because I'm not press, even if I'm with a press person. But I did get it out. I did get my message out. I got it out immediately, and I got it out in front of everyone that was part of press that was there that day. So I guess I felt, for me, I'm on my way now. You know,
Yes.
I've made some headway.
Mhm.
I don't know what it's gonna turn out to, you know, to show. I don't know if it's going to be of any real consequence, but I've made some headway, and now I know what I have to do. I have to talk to the press, and I have to hope that they're telling me the truth. And I have to be charming. You know, all of it was part of it, being charming and being upbeat and feeling guilty about that. And, you know, it was a very difficult mission. It wasn't anything I'd ever done before in my life. I didn't know if I was up to the task. I didn't know if I was adequate to the task, of course. And I didn't know, I really didn't know exactly how I was going to behave, how I was expected to behave, and how I needed to behave. And I'm fond of saying about that experience in Waco, I learned exactly what to do at the moment it was too late. My whole time there of pursuing Janet Reno and William Sessions of the FBI and making these phone calls and trying to be in touch with people who were on the top of the pyramid. It was that I learned what to do pretty much at the moment it was too late. Not always, but enough of the time to not be successful enough to really be of consequence. You know what I'm saying?
But yeah, so these people are hard to reach,
Oh,
I would imagine.
very
Yeah,
hard.
but you were attempting to call them, and
I got all the way up the ladder with William Sessions. I was on the phone for a long time, and I was sent up to another office, and then from there I was sent up to another office, and from there I was sent up to about 4 offices. And then the last one was, we will engage with Mr. Sessions in a few minutes. And then the call was completely dropped. And I just,
okay,
that was it. I got the message. And it was the
yeah,
same with Janet Reno. I couldn't get Janet Reno. So what I ended up doing with Janet Reno was sending her a fax.
yeah, that was a smart thing to do. I did the same thing a few years later when I was trying to communicate with her. Is I managed to get the fax for her office, and that's what I did too. But
That's what I could do.
that was a different case. But and
But
just
I was
so,
there, Catherine.
excuse me.
I was there, and I was a parent, and I was saying who I was. And I didn't understand. I mean, I'm an American citizen. I did not understand. Why wouldn't they talk to me? Why wouldn't they talk to me, even if it was to say, be assured that we are doing everything we can to bring this to a successful conclusion. And that's what kept me scared. And that's what kept me engaged in this whole thing, is that they wouldn't even talk to me. I didn't think I was special. I just happened to be there. And I didn't think I was terribly unique. I was just willing to do that. And I had like 11 different families who were saying, yes, you can be my voice. And when I sent the letter out to Janet Reno, it had the names of all of the families, you know, that allowed me to speak for them. And it had no impact. And that is not American. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care if you're a socialist. I don't care what you are. That is not American. And socialists and socialist Democrats and charismatic Republicans and moderate Republicans, we're all the same American. And we all deserve the same respect, especially in an American crisis, and especially if you are part of it. And by having a son inside Mount Carmel, by God, I'm part of it. And that was very horrifying to me. And I just felt like at that moment, oh my God, you know, I am a lone voice in the hurricane. And mm, I don't know. At that point, I'm thinking, oh, this is not going to work out. And I had to redouble my efforts, which I did. That's when I agreed to appear on Oprah, and I agreed to appear on Montel Williams, and some of these shows that were absolutely ridiculous, and some of them that came to me with a claim that they were concerned and they wanted to really get the information, but really what they were doing was entertainment.
Yes.
You know, it was really
Mhm.
hard to know the difference between the two a lot of the time.
Sure.
I had to go for all of them. I had no choice. I had to
Mhm.
go for all of them. And I think my endeavor was hope that somebody is watching this and they will say, this is not right. And they will pick up the phone and they will call their senator or their congressperson, and they will say, and the, you know, voices would start coming in and telephone would start coming in, and people in Congress and people in the House would have to start saying, you know, at least putting some pressure on the government on behalf of the families inside Mount Carmel, because that's how it works in this country. I mean, that's the only
Yeah.
way we have our voice is through our elected legislators. And that's what I was hoping, that people would just start making that effort to say, there's something wrong here, you know, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
But that was in a vacuum.
Yeah. Do you think maybe the reason why, for instance, the legislators were not interested in helping, do you think it might have something to do with the nature of the coverage and the statements by spokespersons like Bob Ricks labeling the group a cult?
Oh God, yeah. And that they were an ignorant cult, that they were on welfare, and that they took their kids out of school because they were being investigated, and that blah blah blah, and you know, all these things that you could come up with to make a group of look horrible, and a group of families look horrible, and to make mothers look horrible right down the line. And I also think that, as we know, I'm a Democrat. I voted for Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's friend was killed in the first wave. One of his own bodyguards had been killed in the first wave. As far as I'm concerned, battle lines are already drawn, because
Mhm.
that's human.
Mhm.
And that we've learned in these past years that our elected government officials are very human, and they do not always vote for their constituency. They vote for themselves.
Mhm.
And so we're looking at that now. Are Democrats going to stand up behind a cult group in Waco, Texas? Not so likely. That's more going to happen to a Republican side, the malicious side. Are there Democrats that are standing up for the people in Mount Carmel in their hearts? You bet there are. There's a country full of them. But I don't think that they are the most likely people to speak out at this moment in time, because everybody's waiting to see where this is going to fall politically.
Mhm.
And this is a perfect example of where we let our politics get in the way of our hearts and our ethics and what we know is right as human beings. And I saw that happen continuously in Waco, where people press people and people in the community, because I'm all over the place. I'm listening to conversations, and I'm hearing things like, well, I just don't know what to think about what's going on. And I hear people saying, oh, we know what's going on, you know, and you've got this push me, pull you going on constantly, not only in the community, but, you know, within the government, within the press. And it's just one great miasma, and I'm in the eye of the hurricane. And sometimes I look very foolish out there. But I'd say I'm willing to stand on my head and spit nickels if it means I get information, and if it means that I can do something to get my son out of there, and
Mhm.
hopefully more, you know, I mean.
Yes. Wow. I'll just share something with you. Well, anyway, there was a reporter there named Lee Hancock. She was with the Dallas Morning News, and in 2003, at that time, she said she wasn't going to write on the case anymore. She actually did, but she offered to send me all her materials that she had gathered in her research, and I said, "Sure, please send them." And I opened some boxes, and there were a lot of internal FBI documents in there.
Oh
All
my God.
these, yeah, all these documents are now in the archive of Texas State University. Okay, so they're in the archive where people can go and do research. But so one of the internal FBI documents is a log. They call it a major event log, and it was after the fact. And so somebody in the FBI, all the teams who were on the ground there, and then a team in Washington in the Hoover Building, they all were recording things in their own logs. So you had the negotiators, the special agents in charge, hostage rescue team, and also a command center in the Hoover Building. They were all recording things on their log. And then somebody, and the case is called, I don't know how they pronounce it, but it was WACMUR for Waco murder, referring to the
Well,
deaths of the ATF agents. So Wakemore, I guess. But so the document I found, one of the documents I found in her collection was the Wakemore major event log. So after everything ended on April 19th, somebody gathered up all the logs and then pulled out what were considered the major events, and then created this compiled major event log. But the log that I got from her, which was given to her presumably by an FBI agent, it had 2.5 days missing. The pages had just been pulled out. And so for years, I thought, oh, there must have been something secret going on. Were they calling the White House? What were they doing? But then it turns out, just recently, I've discovered that the FBI has put the entire log in an online archive called the FBI Vault for Mount Carmel or Waco. So the whole log is there. And so when I read through the missing 2.5 days early in March, you know what it was? It was all the family members calling. It was records of all the
how
family members
dare
calling.
they? Oh my
And
God.
and so for some reason, whoever gave this reporter, Lee Hancock, the log, the major event log, that person did not want her to see the number of family members who were calling
Ay,
and were
ay, ay.
trying to, offering their help. Also, some psychologists and psychiatrists, they called, and they also had very good advice, But so all of those people were blown off. I mean,
That's
and
hubris. How
yeah,
dare they? How dare they? That is so, oh my God, we expect that. We're supposed to be the smartest nation in the world and the most democratic. That's what we expect from communist countries. That kind of redaction. That's what we expect from the people that we speak out against. And oh, who put it back in, Catherine? Do you have any idea?
well,
God bless them.
I don't know, because of course Lee Hancock protects her sources, so I
Of
don't know.
course.
But
Oh, good. Okay.
so whoever gave it to her just pulled out those pages for 2.5 days.
Oh my
But
God.
the entire log can be found on the FBI Vault, which is their name for an online archive, and it's the
Okay.
FBI Vault. I forget if it's Waco or Mount Carmel, but it's or
Oh my
Branch
God.
Davidians, but you can
Yes.
find it,
Oh, I
and
will be
it's just
looking for that. That's really important. I'm in the process of writing now about
good.
I hope I have a person that's writing with me. I'm
Very good.
dictating my story, and those are the kind of things I need. And I knew it. I knew it. Sheriff Harwell told me that families were very engaged, and for that to happen that's the validation that I need, that when I say these things and they say this woman is nuts, get her out of the state. And thank you very
Yeah.
much for that. That's really important to me.
I can send it to you. I'll send it to
Thank
you.
you so
Okay.
much.
I'll
Thank
send
you.
you both versions, the redacted
Thank you.
version
Oh, God
and
bless you.
the
Thank
complete
you.
version. Okay.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah. I mean, it's like we're still very little people out here trying to get to the heart of a very big, and even though it's 30 years past, it doesn't matter. History, we cannot bury history. And I guess it's kind of my little tiny mission. One, I've done two great things in my life. come home from Waco with my son and continued to be willing to be engaged in not having this stripped out of American history and learning more about what really happened, because it's so easy to, to glorify the untruth if you're on the right side of the untruth.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So who are some of the other people that you met there? For instance, did you meet Bonnie Haldeman, David Koresh's mother?
I met Bonnie Haldeman. That took a little while. I was really, I really had my guard up about that. Bonnie Haldeman and her mother, David's grandmother. Yeah. I was watching them on television and listening to them on television. I'm saying to myself, I don't know if I can engage with these people. These are religious people, and I'm not religious. So we're going to have an impasse from the very beginning, and they won't like me, and they could damage me or I could damage them. And I'm just trying to work it out how I feel about even meeting Bonnie Haldeman. And it's Katie Boyle who convinces me that I do need to meet her. I do need to know her. Her kids are in there too. Her grandchildren.
Her grandchildren. Yes.
Her grandchildren are in there. Her son and daughter-in-law and all of his other wives. They're all in there. They're all family. Whether you acknowledge them or not, they're all family. These young women have fallen in love with their Messiah, and I don't care what, the Texas law at that time brought it down upon themselves. You say a girl can be married at 14 with parental consent, give me a break. What kind of law is that? So already you've got a scar against you, and you're going to try to look like you're the right in this whole, horrible experience. So I say, okay, you're right. I do need to meet her. So I meet Bonnie Haldeman. We're both a little bit leery of each other, of course, because am I the enemy? No. Is she the enemy? No. Do we have a real connection? Yes. Do we have a philosophical or ideological connection? Well, but we don't know yet. We don't know each other yet. And I loved her. I fell in love with her, and she really liked me. And we started over time to really start talking, really start to get to know each other. We weren't hanging around as pals. That was not going to happen. But every engagement I had with Bonnie was just really, really positive. And I really came to like her. And of course, as I get to know her, I get to know more about her story. And then as I get to know more about her story, I get to know more about it from her. And she can correct me. She can say, no, that's not wrong. That's not right. That's a fallacy about my life. This is what really happens. This is what really is. And I really came to just really love Bonnie Haldeman. And after it was all over, we continued to be friends out, for a number of years on, almost up until the time she was murdered by her sister. But, I stayed in touch with her, and I'm really glad looking back at it now that I did, because talk about the ultimate victim of everything, of your religion, of your state, of your family. I mean, Bonnie is a poster child for that. And what did she do? She got a nursing degree, and she took care of people. She took everything she had inside of her, all of that coercion and manipulation of always thinking you have to think about others and never think of yourself. And you have to always stand by your man and never stand up for your own health and your own emotional, well-being. And she took all of that abuse that she had experienced in her life, and she turned it into a nursing degree. And she lost all of those people in Waco and still went on to do something wonderful for other people. That woman is to be honored at every turn, and she deserves it. When I think of Bonnie Haldeman, I just think about how much I love her. She was a beautiful woman. I got to know Mary Jones. Mary Bell Jones, really,
Mhm.
really well. We wrote letters to each other almost up until the time she died. I didn't even know she had died. Nobody in the family told me.
Yeah.
And I know she kept all my letters. I kept all her letters. And again, a woman who's a victim of her religion and a victim of the politic. Thank you very much. Beautiful, beautiful human being. Nothing but wonderful things to say about her. And what did she do when it was all over? She continued to, thank you very much. She continued to live. You know, she continued to be a family to what family she had left. These are strong women.
Yes.
These women grow up to be, even very late in their lives, strong women.
Mhm.
And I'm so glad I got to know them, because I will tell you, they have helped me over the years to deal with Mount Carmel
Mhm.
and to deal with what happened, because none of us did well after that. I
Right.
got my son back, and I
Mhm.
was there with a woman who lost 2 daughters and a granddaughter. And at least one of her daughters was pregnant at the time, Isabel Andrade, and
Mhm.
she lost her children. And she
Yeah.
turned around and said to me, I am so glad you got your son. These are great women. You know, they can take that moment of horror. They
Mhm.
can take that moment of an incident that is going to scar them for the rest of their lives and turn around and become friends with me and say to me, I am so glad you got your son back. We love David. They all said that, Catherine, again and again. We love him. You know, it was like, oh my God, oh my God. You know, for a while, and it took me a while to understand it. I was in a circle of the greatest women on the face of the earth and the
Mhm.
best Americans on the face of the earth, for sure.
Yeah.
And they were discounted. They were discounted, and they were mocked, and they were humiliated, and they were character assassinated. And oh my God, they were all little American saints, you know?
Yeah. I know. I
So that's
agree.
how I ended up. That's how I feel about them. And Bonnie Haldeman, she's on the top of the pyramid because oh man, she was heroic. She was heroic
Yeah. No, she was always helping anyone, everyone. Yes. And
all the
she was
time.
trying to help her sister the day she got murdered. Yes.
I know, I know. She's somebody needs to do something wonderful around Bonnie Haldeman, because she certainly deserves it. She
Mhm.
deserves her day in the sunshine. She deserves her biography. She really
Oh,
does.
well, I did that.
Did you do a
Yeah.
biography
Yeah.
on, oh my God, nobody told
I
me. Oh my God,
All
Catherine.
right. No, I didn't write a biography. I interviewed her and then I edited her autobiography.
Oh
So
my God.
I will send you a copy of her autobiography.
Oh my
So
God.
okay.
Oh, thank you so much.
All
Will you
right.
sign it for me? Thank you.
Sure.
Oh my
Yes.
God. I can't believe I didn't. Well, honestly, let me say this right now. I think some of the way that I dealt with Mount Carmel, and I was able to just get on with my life and do what I did for as long as I have, and take care of my own little corner of the world. I didn't do well for a while. I mean, I abused myself and ate myself into oblivion for a while, and then had to take stock of myself and lose a lot of weight and get healthier. I'm a severe arthritic, in order to survive. But I think one of the ways that I dealt with Mount Carmel was not to deal with it. I didn't read the books. I didn't seek them out. Um, and I will confess, this is a big confession for me, Catherine. I really sped through my son's book because it was too hard for me to read. The first time I read it, even my mother read it very thoroughly, and we talked about it, but I couldn't read it thoroughly. I had to speed through it because I would start to, well, after Waco, I went back that next summer to Greece, and I
Mhm.
developed a terrible anxiety disorder that I ended up having for 15 years. And at that point, I left my partner in Greece and I left my business to come back home, because once I developed the anxiety, well, the relationship, mind you, was already on the rocks. So, and the business, it was hard walking away from my cafe business, but it was his house. It was the house that my partner Louis was born in, and I just had to walk away from everything. But my way of dealing with it was not to deal with it, in order to be able to keep my own strength and to be of use to David, because at this point, David and I are not seeing eye to eye on much of anything. He's dealing with survivor guilt, and he's dealing with severe anger and PTSD. I'm dealing with a new anxiety disorder that was very vicious. I'd never experienced anything like it. So while we're together, we're also going our separate ways, and we're all doing our own self-abuse. And I think that it took people, a lot of us, a long time to, I mean, I was in touch with all of those families all the time that I was in Waco. And after it was all over, I was in touch with a lot of them for a short period of time. Then I think everyone needed to be away from me. You know, I was a big force, a big presence. I was able to save my kid with my big mouth and my running around Waco.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people felt that, because they said to me, I wish I'd come. I wish I'd come when you told me to come. And they didn't, because they're good Americans, because they pay their taxes, and, you know, they vote in the elections, and they do what the government tells them to do. So we all had to deal with the role we played in the end. And even though I was there, I had to deal with the role I played, because, you know, and I've said this before, if I had to act like a clown, I acted like a clown. If I had to, you know, to be somber and serious and miserable and sober, I was, which was easy to do. You know, I just kind of pulled it all out and did what I had to do in order to be there and be able to stay there. And afterward, we all paid the penalty. We all paid the penalty for it. You know, we destroyed ourselves for a long time after Mount Carmel. And, you know, we watched our children do it, those that survived. They've had a horrible life. It's a terrible, it's a it's a terrible burden to have on your back and your shoulders that, you know, is going to lay there for the rest of your life, because you have come to blows with your government, and your government acted without real compassion. I know that there were people in the BATF and the FBI who were very compassionate, but they had no voice. Their voices were silenced too.
That's true.
Yeah. And so when you look back at that and you go, they couldn't speak, nobody could speak. What the hell is going on? Why can't we speak? We have a First Amendment. Why can't we speak?
Well, people were speaking, but you know what? The people who are making the decisions were not listening. So that's the ultimate dilemma about this case is they were receiving good advice from parents, from professionals, psychological professionals, their own behavioral scientists, you know, strange, unknown psychologists who would call them out of the blue, a couple of Bible scholars who got involved, you know, and all the advice was consistent, and that's not what they did.
No.
So that's the question.
You know what? This is in keeping with what you say. When I was first on the telephone with a FBI liaison agent here in Bangor before I went out to Waco, and I said to him, what about family voices? I said, my son and I are very, very close. He lives there and I live here, but we're close. We're on the phone all the time. What about family voices? And he said, we're not working with family voices right now, but perhaps we will in the future. I said, my son may not have a future, and I'm coming to Waco. And that's when my brother and I, you know, got on the ball. My son may not have a future. And that is just exactly in keeping what you're saying. We're not going to do it any way but our way. And if it doesn't exist, if it doesn't work, then maybe we'll look at a new protocol. In the meantime, and this is the clincher, in the meantime, the people in Waco are our experiment. We don't care if they come out alive or dead, because that's exactly what that means as far as I'm concerned. Yes, they want them to come out alive, but if they don't, such is life.
Yes. Well, and if you were, and David, your son, would tell you that, because he's read all the publications of sociologist Stuart Wright, that so he knows that,
Yes.
and Stuart Wright has shown that FBI negotiators do have a good negotiation protocol, but all of the principles of that protocol were broken in this case. So they had a protocol, they just ignored the protocol.
They ignored the protocol. Well, I had never met Gary Nesler and Nesner. And when we were Nesner, when we were in Burbank a couple of years ago to do the interviews for the Netflix documentary, it was the first time I got to meet him, and we actually spent time together. David and Gary and I spent time together. He was there we were all there for a short period of time, and I was able to talk to him, and I was just floored because I didn't realize what had happened to him. He was dismissed because he was not agreeing with their protocol. He was the negotiator for Ruby Ridge. And he wasn't.
No, he wasn't, because I've looked at his book. But
I thought he was negotiating.
But in Waco at Mount Carmel, he was the FBI negotiation coordinator from March 1 through March 24th.
Yeah.
And yes, he in his book he describes how he disagreed with the actions being taken by the hostage rescue team.
Right.
And the high decibel sounds, crushing cars, turning their electricity off, shining bright lights at them. And each time this was
torture.
And this was always done right after the adults inside had done something to cooperate.
Yes.
And so it was like giving them the wrong. They were not reinforcing the behavior which the FBI wanted, which was for people to come out. And so when adults would come out, something would be done to punish the adults on the inside, which just made them more determined to remain inside.
Absolutely. It validated everything that they were taught by David Koresh. It totally validated it. And I think this whole thing, I've thought two things, when it was going on, because I'd seen the documentary, I'd seen the 48-hour documentary on Church Universal and Triumphant. And I said, this is a dry run for cut. And this is an experiment for the FBI. And the thing that makes it evil, truly evil, and the thing that I think requires an outright apology from the federal government to the Mount Carmel community is the fact that those kind of punishments are known. They know that they're punishing, and they know that those punishments are going to create more anger and more hostility. And that's part of experiment. That's not part of negotiation. That's not part of ending a terrible situation as peacefully as possible. That's part of an experiment. That's part of gleaning information by using human beings as your target, by using young women, young pregnant women, mothers and fathers and their children, using children, little children who just want it to be over, and adults within the inside that don't really know what to do next, who are just as confused as their children are. That is taking a community of people and using them as an experiment, and we don't do that anymore in America, right? We did it with MK Ultra, right? We did it with Tuskegee. We supposedly don't do that anymore. Well, we've done it, and the federal government owes that community a big apology. They need to stand up on a podium and say, please forgive us for what we have done. It's not ever going to happen.
No, that's not what they've done, for sure.
But that's how I see it.
Okay, great. So where were you when on April 19th, when the tank and CS gas assault started?
Isabel Andrade and her friend Jaylene and myself were sitting in Isabel's hotel room. We were both at the Brittany Hotel. We had been given free rooms at the Brittany Hotel. The night before, we had checked in because we were working on the desk. We did volunteer work for the Brittany people. We were sitting on the desk. We had checked in. We checked in all of those FBI agents who ended up in those tanks. And we knew who they were, and they knew who we were. And I wish you could have seen the physical exchanges that occurred between us, because it was heavy. And we were in her room, her hotel room, when they started to demolish the building with the tanks. And we knew we were just holding each other. And we knew right then and there that the chances were very, very great that our kids were not going to come out. We didn't know that the fire was going to happen. We knew that they were lobbying in CS gas, because I had called Amnesty International in New York. I wanted them to come. I wanted Amnesty International to come and to try to have some sort of a presence to stop what was happening by the federal government. And I talked to the guy in New York who was the director of that office. And he said he had a bag packed and he was ready to come to Waco, and he was not allowed to, because Amnesty International cannot take any action on anything that's happening on American soil. They can be there if it's happening in other countries, and they can take verbal action, write a report, speak out, but they can't do it in America. Now, I did not understand that. That does not make sense to me. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know what kind of a protocol negotiation that's all about. I've never researched it, and I think I probably should. But he said to me, I'm going to send you a copy of the Amnesty International report on using CS gas. It was Israel using CS gas on Palestinians inside their houses. It gave me all the information I needed to know about what happens when tear gas gets lobbed into closed areas. It becomes CS gas. It has a chemical transformation, and at that point it becomes lethally poisonous. And it also stays in wood, hair, bodies, clothing, furniture, books, toys. It has a shelf life of a very long time. So I've got this Amnesty International report on CS gas, and that's what I sent to Janet Reno. I said, I know that the tanks are coming. I also got a call. Steve Hassan helped me. He got a call from a friend who was in the military, who told me that they're bringing in tanks, Belinda. And he told me that I should talk. Oh, this is one of my greatest regrets. He told me I should speak to the press. Well, I was afraid to speak to the press because Jesse Amen had run into Mount Carmel, and he came out, and they immediately put him in jail. I was afraid that if I spoke to the press about the presence of tanks, that they were coming in, that I would be put in jail. That if I was in jail, I would have gone mad. I wouldn't have known what to do. I wouldn't have been able to do anything. And I know that it would have driven me mad, literally. So I didn't go to the press. I went to Janet Reno. To this day, I wish I'd gone to the press and taken the chance. But that's when I wrote her the letter, and I said, I know that they're coming with tanks, and I know that they're going to put in tear gas, and tear gas turns into CS gas. And please read the Amnesty International report on Israel lobbing, tear gas into the homes of Palestinians and all the deaths that were accrued as a result of it. And I had all the family names on that fax, and I sent that out, and I thought that would do it, that she would say, no, we cannot do this, because I don't know what people are saying in Washington. I don't know what the feds are saying to the people in Washington. I have no inside information. I have outside.
Did you send that on, did you send that on April 19th or maybe a day earlier?
The day before. A day or two before. I think it was 2 days before, because then the next thing it was just a couple days before, because I received this call from this guy in San Antonio who was a cult deprogrammer, and he had worked with the United Church of Christ in Boston when there were multiple suicides in that church. He was brought in to work with them because he was a deprogrammer, psychologist, and a member of United Church of Christ as well. and lived by their dictates, no music, no dancing. And it's a very pretty austere church from what I gather.
Let me just say, there's obviously more than one organization called United Church of Christ. So
oh yeah, this one was a very strict one. It was
okay. It's not
yeah.
that, because there's another one that's a very liberal Protestant
Oh, I didn't
denomination.
know that.
Yeah,
Oh, that's wonderful.
kind of
Good,
like
a little bit of balance.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll just make sure it's not.
Clarify that,
We
because
won't get
I
them
do not want to engage
confused.
in that whatsoever.
Mhm.
I only want to mention the name of an organization or a church if they are doing things that appear to be harmful to their parishioners.
Sure.
So that's
Yes.
what was happening in Boston. So this guy calls me and I talked to him and he said, no, they got tanks coming. He was military as well. So then I sent Janet Reno. Then I called Amnesty International. They got me the report. Then I sent that report on to Janet Reno, along with the letter and the signatures. And then the next day, Isabel and Jaylene and I checked in the FBI agents that would be in those tanks. And then the following day was the 19th, and the community fell.
Wow.
So it was pretty devastating. And I always mention the Amnesty International report because I know the BATF and the FBI should have had and would have had knowledge of that. And Janet Reno should have had the knowledge of that. And if she got it, she may have never even seen.
Yes.
She may never have seen it, like I got all the way up to William Sessions, but I don't get to talk to him. That fax would have gone up a ladder of people, and somebody would have made a decision as to whether she should see it or not.
Yes.
Because I think it's believed that Janet Reno was led astray.
Yes, I believe that because in the Hancock collection of materials, there's a big, big expanding file folder, and it's labeled Reno briefing file. And there's just one little document in it from a case in Northern Ireland where CS was put into a home, and a baby was in there, and the baby suffered, from the CS. But it also says the baby recovered. But what it leaves out is that the baby spent a long time in the hospital after being exposed to CS, and so that was the only, at least in the briefing file, if the briefing file that's in the Hancock collection is the briefing file that was actually shown to Janet Reno, Attorney General Janet Reno, then she was misled. And also there was an Army medical doctor who was backing up that report and telling her that CS did not harm babies.
Oh my God. And I'd like to know if that child, as an adult, what is that child's life like now? I have to plug in my phone because I'm running out of battery. I'd like to know what that person's life is like now. If there was ongoing damage, if there was, brain damage, if there was a neurological damage to that person, have they had a real and normal life?
Yes, good question. I don't know, but well, I think you did well to reach out to Amnesty International and then send the report to Reno. I do think it's questionable if they ever showed it to her. I don't know who was screening her faxes, but she appears to have been misled.
I think so. The reason, and again, the reason I could do this is because I had training. I had training in, civil disobedience, and I have, I was a member of, what regular, I guess, normal Americans would consider radical political groups. I do not consider Peace in Central America and Let Cuba Live, and demonstrating against the Vietnam War. I don't consider that liberal radical. I just consider that your right to be concerned about our intervention in other places in the world and what happens to people as a result of it. And because of that, I could think of Amnesty International. I also got in touch with Jane Fonda and Joan Baez's groups. I got no response from them. And that's why, again, I say, I think a lot of people just were sitting on their hands, waiting to see what was going to happen, because politically speaking, this was not the kind of event that a lot of Democratic or left political groups would even consider engaging in. And maybe it's just because it was on American soil. Maybe just because it was on American soil.
Or
It's
maybe because they were called cultists. I mean, it's hard to tell. Yeah.
That's right. Or maybe they were warned, the federal government. I mean, people have had to take steps back because of federal government warnings, because their reputations, were sullied because of their political engagements, especially luminaries, people who are in the limelight. So I think that's another thing that the federal government may well have learned through the whole Waco debacle is that you put enough pressure on the right people and they will back down. They will wait to see what happens. And then once it's happened, it's too late for them to open their mouths because, we've got our thumbs on the pulse of the media and how information is disseminated.
Mhm.
I don't know, Catherine. It's just also complex. It's really complex. And I wish I had the intellectual capacity to really understand it, to get to the bottom of it. I just go with the wave. The wave takes me along. And, when you're on a wave, you ride it well. And sometimes you get battered by it. And I think those of us who have stayed engaged in the whole Waco thing have gotten some pretty intense calluses on our hearts and our minds and our souls in order to continue to be battered by it, because we're battered by it. We continue to be battered by it. It's hard. It's really hard.
I understand. No,
Yeah.
I understand. So if it's and you let me know, but if it's not too distressing for you, could you talk a little bit about how you found out that David got out of the
Oh
fire
my
alive?
God, that was so amazing. So Jaylene and Isabel and I are watching this horrible thing unfold before our very eyes. And there's this huge fire, but there are no fire trucks. There are no emergency services. We can't see anything. Where's the emergency services? What is going on? I mean, we should have. Oh, part of me says we should have been out there with the media on that day, but we weren't. I don't know why we weren't. We didn't think it was going to happen. I think we didn't think it was going to happen. I think part of us thought that the show of military might was going to be so strong that the Mount Carmel community would just say, okay, it's over. We've got to come out. I guess we weren't thinking that the federal government had, not continued to honor its agreement to let David Koresh unfold his interpretation of the seven seals like they said they would. If you say you're going to do something, I think you got to do it, no matter how long it takes, especially in a situation like this. Time was not of the essence. Time was something that needed to be accepted. So we're watching it on television because somebody came to us, that's right, and said, Belinda, you've got to get up to your room, watch the television right now. Something is happening. So we're not going to be able to get there. We're not going to be able to get down there where the press is. It's happening right now. And I'm not 100% sure why we didn't drop everything and get a taxi and go out to where the press was, but we didn't. We're watching it on television. I look at Isabel. Isabel looks at me. We burst into tears. Our children are gone. I ran to my room because I wanted to scream, and I didn't want to do it to Isabel. I go to my room and I throw my face into a pillow, and I started screaming and screaming. And then I got my breath again. And then I said, okay. You just got to go back in and be with Isabel, and let's see what happens. Maybe people will come out. It's not over yet. So I go back into the room. And of course, there's on the scene reportage. It's second by second, minute by minute. And I had befriended this wonderful reporter named Bob Ricks, who was a reporter in Texas. And he was one of the angels on my shoulder through the whole thing. He
His
had
name was
shown
his name was Bob Ricks.
Ricks, not Riggs. Oh,
Bob Ricks was
oh, okay. So
the
this was
FBI
Robert.
agent.
Oh, Bob Ricks is the FBI agent. Robert Riggs, R-I-G-G-S. I've got his
Got
card somewhere, and he's with one of the Texas bureau news bureaus. So he and he's giving me information. He's helping me all along the way. I interview with him every time he asks me for an update. He tells me what he knows. He's a very wonderful guy, and he's a big part of my strength. He's a part of my personal strength to do what I'm doing. And at one point he shows me, he says, you know, it's easy to understand why the people stayed with David Koresh and why they came to love him. And he shows me a video of the Mount Carmel community when it was still under the prophetship of Lois Roden and her husband. And there were all these, there's a circle of little houses. I know you've seen it. And they're all kind of gone to rack and ruin. And he said, look, no toilets. He showed me the tape of the inside of the houses. Some of them, no running water, no toilets. Toilets are broken down. It's in a state of such disrepair that when David took over, he demolished everything. They built Mount Carmel. They made themselves a much nicer place to live. Little things like that mean a lot to people, especially people who have lived with deprivation. They're moving up. It looks like they're moving up in their own society. They're moving up in their own ideology. People are coming together, you know. So he said, you can understand why people see it as their home, why people see it as their church, why people see it as their community and their family. So he's given me this beautiful information. Well, when David and Jamie Castillo come out of the back, it wasn't an FBI agent that, like in the Dowdle Brothers production, the FBI agent played by Michael Sheen says to me, "Your son is still alive." That's not how it happened. It was Robert Riggs who said on the television, he named the people coming out, and he said, David Thibodeau has come out, and he said it with real inflection. And I knew that that message was for me. I knew that he was talking to me directly because he had been talking to me from the beginning and helping me. I never felt for a moment that media representative was ever trying to manipulate me. I always felt that we had real simpatico, like I did with Catherine Davis. And later on, Scott Pelley, when Scott Pelley came down to take Kathy Boyle's place, I felt that way with Scott Pelley as well, that there were these people in the media that I had real simpatico with, and they're the good people. And I felt that way about Kathy Boyle as well. It wasn't her fault that it got edited to make me look like a clown. So be it. So be it, you know. But Robert Riggs said David Thibodeau has walked out. And I said, oh my God. And that's when I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then that's when Isabel Andrade looks at me and she said, oh, Balenda, I'm so happy you have your son. And then, for those of us who are spiritualists, my watch stopped. My watch stopped working. But my watch stopped working just before that. And I said to Isabel, oh my God, my watch has stopped working. David's dead. David's gone. And then he came out, and then Robert Riggs said, David Thibodeau has come out. And I'm going, oh my God, that must have been the moment that he was coming out and not the moment he was dying. That was really important to me because I come from a very long line of spiritualist New England women. Very long line. And they're spiritualists, you know, the spiritualist community now is very Christian oriented. And even though that's not the world that I really live in, I'm very much a part of the spiritualist community in Maine, as well as I am the Universalist Unitarian community in Maine. So this is where I get my spiritual strength. And when I hear my mother's voice, I hear my mother's voice, you know. So that was just a validation for me. Which I read the wrong way. But it, when I look back on it, I go, oh my God, that was somebody saying to me, your son is okay. There's a validation. You will get the information. But of course, I'm acting so emotionally. I read it. He's gone. He's dead. I just have to take the next step. But I was one of the fortunate ones. My son came out. And that's how that whole day unfolded.
Wow.
And then we're in a daze. We're in a total daze. Isabella's lost, oh my gosh, she's lost 2 daughters, a grandchild, and a prospective new grandchild yet to come. And her loss has been so tremendous. It's indescribably tremendous. And I've come out exactly where I wanted to come out, with my son alive. I don't know yet at this moment where the kids were and where the mothers were. I didn't know that the mothers had gone into the bunker, that they'd covered themselves with wet blankets, that they were hoping that they were going to get out of it. I couldn't think about it. I just couldn't. I couldn't think about it. I just had to focus on the fact that David is out now. What happens to him next? And of course, the next thing that happens is that, in spite of everything that's happened, he goes right into a prison cell. He's singed. He's burned on the face. He's traumatized. And does he go to a hospital? No, he goes right to Waco community jail. So that was the next step to have to deal with. And then still, I be a friend, try to be a friend to Isabel, which I could only be there. I really couldn't be anyone really significant. I couldn't be anyone significant at that moment for her. My kid had come out. There's no power in the universe. There's no power in the universe. I had to take a step back, just be there when she was gonna come to me. And then they stayed on for a few days. And then the next year I went out to California to see her, which was beautiful, and to see the graves of the girls. And just to kind of get closure of our relationship, which was really significant. And then I started the process of, I had befriended the nurse that was at the Waco community jail. I had befriended her when I was visiting Kathy Schroeder and Oliver Gierfis. When they came out, I started visiting them, because that was one of the other things I wanted to do, was to try to at least be of use to people who came out and were put in jail. I tried to bring them books. They wouldn't let them have books. They allowed them to have puzzle books. I brought them some puzzle books. I brought them stuff that they would not allow them to have. They would not allow them to have things. And I will tell you without compunction that the treatment of people at the Waco jail when I was there, what I observed was subhuman. Subhuman. They treated the women there that were there to see their partners who were incarcerated like animals. Women would be there with their children. They showed no regard for them. I had brought Kathy, the nurse, a copy of Steve Hassan's book, Combating Cult Mind Control. Steve Hassan had sent me a case of those books. And I had brought one to the nurse. Her name was Kathy. I don't remember her last name. CK, I called her, at the prison. And she never got that book. And the women there insisted that the book was never delivered, that I never came there, and I never gave a book for them to give to Kathy. And I suspect that the authorities confiscated that book. Kathy never saw it. So when David came out and he went into Waco prison, and they wouldn't let me see him at first, she took care of him. She tended to his wounds, and she told him that she knew me, and that as soon as I could come and see him, she would see to it that I was able to come and see him. And then the first time I was able to come to see him, I guess the next day, because of course they had to interrogate him, I was only allowed to talk to him through a small window at his cell, just through the window. I could only see him through a rectangular window, not much bigger than my iPhone here. And that's how I was able to communicate with David for the first few days. I did not see him in person until the court, until he was in court, the arraignment. So the first time I saw David was at the arraignment, and he had gotten Gary Richardson as his attorney. And Gary Richardson was a very powerful attorney in, is it Kansas and Texas? Is Kansas above Texas? Kansas. Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. So Gary was one of those privileged lawyers who won his cases. And I had the magnificent luck to get Gary Richardson pro bono for David. So when I saw David a few days later at the arraignment, Gary said, "You can hug him. It's okay. You can hug him." And that was the first chance I had to make physical contact with my son. It was hard. It was hard. Really nasty. There was, I mean, they took everything away. They took his shoes away from him. When David was let out of prison, he came out of prison barefoot because they had taken his shoes and his clothes. He came out of prison barefoot. One of the people waiting out back with me to receive him when he came out ran to a dollar 5 and 10 cent store and got him a pair of rubber sandals because he walked out of prison barefoot. What kind of treatment is that of people? What kind of treatment? How does Texas hold its head up, Catherine, to do something like that? To continue to assassinate his character, even when he's freed and let out. I mean, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. It makes me so angry, but it also makes me feel paralyzed. You know, I feel as paralyzed as I do angry enough to take action. What do? You keep your mouth shut because your kid just got out of jail. And somebody says to you, "Oh, Judge, what was it? Smith?
Smith.
Judge
Walter
Smith.
Smith.
Somebody said to me, "Oh, Judge Smith told Gary Richardson he wants you out of Texas in the next 24 hours. And I said, "Bullshit. I'm taking David down to San Antonio, and then we're going to Austin to meet a friend of ours." And I stayed in Texas for 10 more days.
Mhm.
I mean, how dare they to be so cruel to people? They've already conquered them. They've slaughtered them. I mean, has it not changed since medieval times? Now you have to emotionally enslave them. You send someone out of prison without shoes. You don't allow somebody something to read while they're incarcerated in a small room and they have come out in good faith. I don't understand this. I'll never understand it. I could have a high IQ and be in Mensa and I wouldn't understand it.
Yeah. Well, and we should add here for the people watching this video that there were no charges pressed against David Thibodeau.
There were no
None.
charges pressed against David Thibodeau because he said he never picked up a gun, and his friends apparently supported that. So to this day, I am of the belief, and I will stay of the belief, that my son picked up prayer during that time. He fasted and prayed. God bless him. And he was remanded to my custody, and it was said it was, yeah. And I don't know what the documentation is on that. Have you read the documentation on David's release from prison and his being remanded to my custody? Was there anything unusual about that?
No, I haven't seen it, but I'll see if I can look for it. Okay.
I've never
All right.
questioned it because believe me, I took the ball and ran on that one.
Yes.
David and
Very
I
good.
we stayed in Texas for a while, but we got out of Waco. And that could be another whole story of my life as well. I mean, I don't know. I try not to be paranoid. And I try not to give myself too much credit. It is my belief that he was remanded to my custody because he did not pick up a gun. And it is my hope and dream, and only David knows what he really did. And I believe him. I do not think it was because I was such a big mouth and I was all over the place that he was remanded to my custody. I think that it was because I was such a big mouth and I was all over the place that I was supposed to be told by Gary Richardson to get out of Waco in the next 24 hours. I don't recall Gary ever saying that to me. Somebody else came and said that to me. I think it was, I can't remember who it was. David knows who it was. He wrote a book.
Yeah. Yes.
He wrote one of the
It's probably in the book. Yes, it's
yeah.
in his book. Well, let me ask you before we finish up here. You mentioned Steve Hassan and how he was a big help to you. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Steve Hassan, as I said, was one of the angels on my shoulder as well. I came across his name. I came across Stephen Hassan because he was on television. And he was from the Cult Awareness Network. He had written the quintessential book called Combating Cult Mind Control.
Mhm.
And he had been a student of Robert J. Lifton, who was supposedly one of the cult psychologists.
Well, he studied brainwashing.
Yes, that's
The
right.
alleged he studied the alleged brainwashing. Yeah,
That's
especially
right. Was that the
in
MK Ultra?
I don't know if he got no. He was more interested in like brainwashing in China and North Korea.
Oh, okay.
You
Yes,
know,
you're right. I remember that now. Right. He wasn't involved in the I was thinking the LSD trials. No, no, you're right. He was involved in Asia and China, and you're right. And so Steve had studied with him and became a cult awareness person and got trained as a deprogrammer when he had been in the Moonies. He had been in the Moonies. He had been way up in the Moonie hierarchy. He was the one who told me that families were an essential bridge. He said he had gotten in a car accident and broken his leg. And while he was in the hospital, his family came back into his life. And over time, while he was recovering, talked him out of staying with the Moonies and coming back into outside of the Mooney society back into our society. And he said to me, you've got to keep your focus as a family member, and you've got to stay in touch with the families. And no matter what happens, you've got to keep hounding the feds about family intervention because it is more essential than they'll ever admit. And so he sent me a case of his books, Combating Cult Mind Control, and I started passing them out. I passed them out to people of the press. I passed one out to the nurse at the Waco County Jail.
mm-hmm.
And the weirdest thing I did was I passed one out to one of the FBI agents who I think might have been in one of the tanks. I was in my hotel room, and my FBI liaison agent was there with me, and a few other people were there with me. David was still in jail. David was still in jail because and the FBI, the guys from the FBI that had been in the tanks, this was maybe 2 days later, were leaving. They were leaving Texas, and they were leaving Waco, and they were all signing out of the hotel and going out. And there was this one FBI agent, a small guy who I had made eye contact with when I was checking him in. And it was real clear to me he did not like where he was. He was doing his job. He wasn't relaxed. He had a very, very tense, stressed out look about him. And he happened to be on the floor that I was on. And I saw him going to the elevator with his duffel bag. And I said to the people in the room, hold on just a minute. And I grabbed one of the books and I got in the elevator with him. And the elevator is going down, and I hit the stop button. And I stopped that elevator, and I wish you could have seen the look on his face. He was just freaked out. And I said, I want you to take this book, and I want you to read this book. And I said, I want you to read it for your family, and I want you to read it for your knowledge, because this is what should have happened. This is what should have happened, and this is what didn't happen. And then I hit that button, and he went down. We went down, and the door opened, and he went out just as rigid as a board with the book under his arm, and I went back up, and that was the end of that. And that was Steve Hassan's impact on me. His impact gave me the chutzpah to just take that little moment and act on it, and hand that book to this FBI agent who had torn down Mount Carmel and had been there and seen what that action had done, seen the destruction of that action. And I don't know who he is. I don't know where he is. I don't know anything about it. I would give my eye tooth to make contact with that guy again. Even if he said to me, you're the biggest, you're the biggest monster I've ever met in my life. And I wouldn't care. I would really like to make contact with him again. That's my story.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story with me. It's an important story. I'm glad to hear you're writing, so I encourage you to write. And with your permission, in a few days, I'll put this up on YouTube, and I think a lot of people will be interested and moved to watch it. So,
Catherine, thank you so much. I have so felt completely relaxed and open in talking to you. I thank you so much for your longevity and the impact you've had on the Mount Carmel community, its survivors, its history, its future history, because that future history is going to be right on the right track as long as you're drawing breath.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
100.
Well, maybe, but
hey, maybe we both will.
Maybe we will
talk about it again.
Yeah,